Festival literature sveta Fabula.
Še enkrat sem opovedala zgodbo, ko sta me med podiplomskim študijem mama in oče obiskala v mojem študentskem stanovanju na univerzi Yale in sem rekla:
Bi malo sok granatnega jabolka?
Hvala, ne bi karkoli že to je.
Kako je bil očetov obraz v nekem trenutku popolnoma brezizrazen, v naslednjem pa se je veselo režal do ušes. Moj dih je bil težak. Se v šoku zrak spremenil v lepilo?
Kar pozabi.
Bova naslednjič, očka.
V redu, naslednjič.
In res je bil, dokler ni bil.
Thank you very much. A well-deserved applause, but we have to hurry, you know. So, Ms. Adichie, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. It's your first time in Slovenia?
It is.
I'm a journalist, so you know, we were quite famous for wore-out questions. How do you find Slovenia after being a couple of hours here?
Terrible. No, it's very green.
Yes.
When I did my research, I kept reading about how green it was, and I thought the mountains were beautiful when the plane was descending. Sometimes I go to countries and I just step out of the airport and you have the feeling.
Okay.
It's something intuitive that you cannot really name, and it's either I like it here or I don't. And I like it here.
You will like it even more if you stay here for some more days.
And the taxi driver was so lovely.
Oh, yes.
I think taxi drivers, they're very good indicators of the people of a country.
Well, actually, we don't have Nigerian taxi drivers here because they're very famous in the States.
Indeed.
I'm a journalist, so I heard that there was actually a problem with the taxi driver. Because you couldn't... there was not enough space for your luggage.
How do you know that?
We're a small country, so information go round and round.
No. I think we should be a bit specific. I just had 2 very large suitcases.
And a very small car was ordered for you.
Yes. No, but you know what it is? I'm on my way. So I came from Lagos, and I'm going to the US, and so I have lots of things that I'm taking to the US from Nigeria. So.
Of course, yes.
So that's why.
Yeah. Okay, but we would like to start with your book, Notes on Grief, an interesting Slovenian title, a Slovenian translation, Zapiski o žalovanju. It's a little bit longer, but I think it has a really, I would say, interesting melody.
What does it translate to? I mean, is it a...
Yeah, Zapiski o žalovanju means notes on grief.
No, you never know, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, no. It is like this, but you know, Slovenians are grieving very long, so that's why žalovanje is a very long word. So grief in English is shorter, and the Slovenians they like grieving. So that's why the word. So of course you are an icon of literature, an icon of style. We see it. Yes, we hear the confirmation up there. And of course, the icon, and we would of course touch this thing, the icon of feminism. But let us start with the book, because it's a small book. It's a short book, but it's extremely powerful because it's personal. And you're such a brave author because you write about things which are quite universal, but in a way which is, as I said, extremely brave, because a lot of authors are actually avoiding this, grieving. So tell us, how did you write it? I mean, how different is this book from your previous books, which are so popular and so important?
I think this one is the most personal. It's intensely, deeply personal. And I think it's also different because when I started writing it, I didn't write it with the intention of publishing it. I started writing it because I needed to try, and I just needed to write. And because I turn to writing all the time. So when I'm feeling things, I write. And my father had died. It was the most devastating thing that had ever happened to me in my entire life. And I started writing, and I really just thought I would send it to my siblings because, you know, this was the one thing we shared. And then at some point I thought, no, I'm going to publish it. So in that sense, I think it's quite different. But it's also, I think my voice is different. I think my father's death changed me. And I like to say that I became, because of grief, I became another person. And it's that person who wrote this. And I think going forward that I think my writing will just be different. I can't really tell you how, but because I know that I'm different. And I have a lot more patience for a number of things and a lot less patience for many other things. I hold in my hand this glowing rage about my losses, my father and my mother. And all of those things affect me, and I'm so much more aware of how short life is. I'm so much more aware of mortality. I am very precious about certain things, and I'm also very fuck it about many other things. And all of those things are new.
Yeah, because it's also the circumstances are different. It was your father died in the time of a pandemic, a global event. You couldn't go home to Nigeria right after his death, which would be, let's say, a normal thing to do in normal times. So it's also a modern thing. How do you think? Okay, you are a different person now, or a sort of a different person, still making fantastic books. How did the whole situation change you or change us? I mean, this pandemic, a lot of grieving for people we lost, and for the life actually we lost. So how different are we as mankind or human society?
I like to think, it seems to me that this feeling of being aware of how short life is something that it kind of feels a bit collective. And so I have friends, for example, who gave up their jobs, and friends who are not necessarily people who it might seem that they could afford to give up their jobs. People who suddenly think, actually, I don't care about what I'm doing. I want to do something else because I suddenly am thinking about life as this very fleeting and precious thing. I think maybe we appreciate family a bit more, because I know that the cousins I used to find extremely irritating, I no longer do, because I couldn't see them for 2.5 years, and suddenly I think, you know, I really like you. I don't know how long that will last, but you know, I think I think that maybe we appreciate one another a bit more. I certainly do, I think. But also, maybe we're a bit more fragile as well. You lose people and you can't bury them. You're reading the news and just the numbers of people dying. I mean, I remember how it just felt so surreal for me, reading the news every day at the peak of the pandemic, and you can't go out. And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we still need time to figure out exactly the extent to which we have changed.
Yeah, you told us that you changed. How will this affect your writing?
We'll see. I don't know.
But you write all the time, so I mean, you haven't stopped writing.
I haven't, but I'm also very superstitious, so I don't like talking about what isn't out. Yeah.
Well, the process of writing this book was apparently, you told us, a little bit different. How difficult was it for you write it because it's so personal. It deals with the grief of the most important person in your life.
You know, it's actually an interesting thing to think about, because it wasn't necessarily difficult to write. I was feeling difficult emotions.
Okay.
But writing about what I was feeling almost felt necessary. In some ways, I took to writing to console myself. So it really wasn't that difficult. And I at some moments felt my father's presence, and so that for me was, I remember thinking about what Daddy would think about it, because he had an opinion about everything I wrote. Obviously not always complimentary. My father was a very honest man. So it wasn't really difficult. It was, but it was very strange. I mean, I would sometimes stop and just weep, and then sometimes in writing, I would think, I cannot believe I'm writing about my father being gone. And sometimes, I mean, even sitting here talking about it, I still feel this kind of layer of disbelief. And I was thinking about how to grieve is to really be in this constant state of astonishment. You forget sometimes, and then suddenly you remember, and you think, it actually happened. You know, and I feel that way even more about my mother, who died a few months after my father, and who died really unexpectedly. And in some ways, I'm not even able to look at that yet, you know. So, yeah.
Okay, we stop talking about grief. We start talking about your technique of writing, because you're, as I said, a famous writer, but what you also do, and this is a very important thing, you teach young people in Nigeria how to write. So you have these workshops on writing. But how do you write? I mean, what's your technique of writing? Do you use a computer? Do you use an old type? Do you want some water?
Yeah, I was wondering, is there water in it? Yes, there is. Okay. I mean, I wasn't sure if it was a prop, because it you know, you never know.
It's actually famous Slovenian tap water, which is healthy.
Full of vitamins, is it?
Oh yes, vitamins, minerals. Heavy metals, no, and no alcohol, of course.
That I would welcome, but
later. I mean, how do you write? I mean, you open a blank page on your computer and you write, or do you use your typing machine, or you do handwriting? I mean,
I open a blank page and stare at it for long periods, and then start typing, hopefully. I make notes longhand, but I can no longer write longhand. I started out writing longhand, obviously, because I started writing very young, and obviously did not have a computer at the age of 6 or 7. Started typing when I went to the US at 19. And now I cannot write sort of long form prose by hand, but I still really need to make notes by hand, because it's just a different. I think one communicates with one's creative self in a different way when one writes longhand. And so when ideas come to me, or when a character speaks to me in that way that can be quite magical, I write longhand. And then when I'm actually writing, I'm typing at my computer.
When does your writing become art? I mean, what's this click when you say, wow, this is it? I mean...
Yeah, you know, but you can't describe it. You just know. It's a lightness of being.
It's really nicely put. And you're so successful. So I mean, how do you find... I mean, a lot of your stories are actually personal, because, or let's say a personal history. Of course, you come from Nigeria, and the Igbo nation has, of course, a rich history. Unfortunately, also a very dramatic one. And your first books were actually about a war we somehow know about, because, as you may know, that Slovenia was a part of Yugoslavia before, and Yugoslavia was one of the leading countries of the non-aligned movement. So things happening in Africa were quite covered by media then. So we know about the war in Biafra, and I mean, how do you choose your topics you will write about?
I think it's been different for each of my books. With Half of a Yellow Sun, which is about the Biafran War, I think the subject chose me. I've been obsessed with our history for as long as I can remember. And I think it's because I grew up in this household that had been deeply affected by the war. My grandfathers both died in 1969 in Biafra, both of them in refugee camps, and they were successful, titled Igbo men. And, you know, because of war, they were reduced to dying in refugee camps and being buried in unmarked graves. And I think that deeply affected my father and my mother. And so I grew up, and my father had just come back from the US a year before the war started. And, you know, I think, and it's, you know, of course now I look back and I have to intellectualize these things. But at the time, the only thing I knew was that I was drawn to our history. I was drawn to our past. I was very curious about what had happened to not just my family, but to Igbo people in Biafra. But also, nobody really talked about it. So my mother would say things like, I used to have such beautiful china until the war, right? Yeah, I should have put this on silent, sorry. And my father would say things like, I had the first edition of that book, but it was lost in the war, that sort of thing. And so I would then ask questions. So I really feel that Biafra chose me, and there's something about it that the word isn't mystical, but it's, in some ways I needed to write about Biafra. I just love that. How old is that gorgeous person?
I think he or she's so young that he or she can't answer the question, actually.
Yeah, that was meant for the parents.
Yeah. Koliko je stara? Koliko? 9 months?
Oh, I'm such a baby lover.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing baby. This is a good start. Baby is going to love literature.
It's actually good. It's lowering the average age of the audience dramatically. Your father was a statistician, so I know you like statistics.
Yes, my father actually would like that. He'd be like, so now it means that your average reader in Slovenia is 10 and a half years old. But
we're getting older and older. I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's typical Slovenian. We're one of the oldest population in Europe.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Africa is taking over.
Oh yes. We don't have
youngest.
enough Africans. That's our problem. They would lower the average.
Well, wait till your former prime minister hears that. All right. No, but
He would answer, "I don't have enough time. Now, I have to quit." Okay.
I can see you feel strongly about certain things.
Yes.
That's admirable. No, so Biafra chose me.
Yeah.
Purple Hibiscus I wrote because I was homesick. I was in the US. I couldn't afford to go back home. I was living in Connecticut. The winter was very cold. And so I started writing Purple Hibiscus. It was just sort of this, I think, quite romanticized, nostalgic look at this town where I grew up. But also, I wanted to write about Catholicism and male violence and all of those things. But yeah, and then Americana.
Which was the first book translated
Purple.
into Slovenian?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And Americana, which is my most recent novel, and it's incredible because apparently it's almost 10 years. I mean, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. My agent said to me recently, "Oh, your publishers are thinking about what to do for the 10th year anniversary of Americana." And I thought, what? I mean, my first thought was, why are they starting so soon? I mean, I thought I'd published it 4 years ago, but Americana came from, I'd written a deeply sad book, which is Half of a Yellow Sun. Americana came from from a need to laugh because I had cried too much. And I wanted to, and of course, throughout my years in the US, I had observed, watched, listened, learned, and always knew I would write about race, always knew I would write about this phenomenon that I call becoming black in America, because when I was in Nigeria, I wasn't black. I didn't think of myself as black. But I also wanted to write it in a way that was quite different. I had read books that were ostensibly about race in America, but they just never looked it in the face because race is so contested. And I think for a lot of literary writers, the idea of being direct about something so contested, I think they think that they run the risk of not creating art or something. And I wanted to do something entirely different. And so I wanted to use humor to talk about race and immigration and hair. And I wanted to have fun. And I also no longer wanted to be a dutiful daughter of literature, because I think I had been. And so I wanted to break the rules and just do whatever the hell I wanted.
But if you would write Americana too, because it should be 10 years after that, would you still laugh? I mean, a lot of things happened.
No.
No?
No. If it were based in the Trump years, no. Laughter, no, it just wouldn't even work. Because in some ways, I think the book rides on the idea of poking fun at things. But I think America during the Trump years was such a parody of itself that it just wouldn't work to poke fun at something that itself is absurd. I don't think it would work at all. And isn't your country responsible for giving us Mrs. Trump?
Yes. Former First Lady.
Someone said sorry.
Don't be sorry. She made us a sort of famous, because before the Slovenian English accent was not so well known in the world. But then she came and, a lot of people started to think, well, how does this lady speak? So that was Slovenian American. So, I mean, she made us famous. Sort of.
Is she a well-known figure in Slovenia?
She used to be. She used to be a model here.
A well-known one? I mean, a successful one?
Yeah, relatively. But then she chose to go to America, to marry a big man, and
good for her,
they're still married.
Yeah, apparently. But I do have to say that for many years I felt a kind of sympathy for her.
Yeah?
Yes. Because I did.
But she's not a feminist, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think so. But many women aren't, but they still get my sympathy because I think there's a line by Gloria Steinem that I really like, where she writes that a female fate is not a personal flaw. And so I think that there are many women who make anti-feminist choices because of conditions, right? I think we live in a world that sometimes presents women with too few options. And so I'm generally not interested in judging women for not, being feminist enough. So my sympathy for her really was that it seemed to me that she'd been plunged into something she hadn't planned for. And I just could not imagine. But then I read a book that her, I guess, former friend had written, and my sympathy started to dissolve because it was very jarring for me. But again, reading books of that sort, one has to be careful because, this is a former friend, so you just never know what agendas people have. But she wrote about Mrs. Trump questioning Obama's Americanness. This just standard trope of racism. And I just really felt angry because I thought, how dare you, Yeah. So my sympathy started to dissolve.
Okay. Actually, Slovenia is a very interesting country when it comes to racism. Of course, I mean, unfortunately, it would be a bold thing to say that Slovenians are that no Slovenian is actually racist, or no Slovenian in Slovenia. But actually, we have a really interesting story. You know that the first black mayor of a Slovenian town was actually elected 10 or 12 years ago. It's a doctor of medicine, a physician, originally from Ghana, Mr. Bosman, who became a mayor, and he got 2 terms, just like Trump. No, Trump just...
No, thank
Trump
goodness
got
he
1,
didn't.
thank God. Of a very important town in Slovenia, which is Piran, which is, let's say, the tourist town. It's a sort of Slovenia's Monte Carlo or Slovenia's Florida. And race was never a problem. I mean, he was, I mean, really, during both campaigns, nobody really issued the question of race. But after his second term, when he decided not to run again, he told to a German newspaper, a German magazine, that he thought that he wouldn't be re-elected for the 3rd time because of the whole, let's say, situation with the refugee crisis in Syria. That actually, let's say, the situation in Slovenia became a sort of racist, which is incredible. I mean, but in a way he was right. It's coming. It's perhaps coming as an import, but it's coming.
No, I think in some ways what that shows is how leadership sets the tone. And I think Trump did that to America, which is to say, I don't think, and I'm not saying that under Obama, America's racism was present, but it wasn't so overt. Trump changed things, and I think that the tone of his leadership suddenly made people who might not otherwise have been so vocal about, what I would call anti-human ideas, suddenly felt that they could talk about them because Trump enabled it. So I think leadership is so important. And so when I'm reading about Europe, for example, I'm thinking the guy in Hungary. So I'm thinking that he's created a tone in Hungary and Poland. So when I went to Poland not long ago, and I was thinking, I don't know what that's going to be like. But it seems to me that before, what is his name, Orban? Viktor Orban?
That's the Hungarian prime minister.
Yeah. So before Orban, it seems to me that Hungary, so you're reading things and there are people being quoted just saying horrible things about immigrants. I don't think they would have said that before Viktor Orban.
Probably not. No. The thing is that, of course, sometimes you see that, return to tradition is a sort of a response of let's say, facing a globalized world, seeing that the world is changing, that actually human race is coming together at last, because I mean we're one people. So that's perhaps a sort of a normal or logic response. And we're also facing that here, and it's the same thing with the position of women in society. For example, Slovenia is quite famous. Perhaps I'm talking too much. Sorry. People came to hear you, not me. That, for example, one of the cornerstones of Slovenian prosperity, we are a prosperous nation, is because women were given the possibility to work after World War II, to take positions, to educate, and this is really the difference. The difference women achieved here for our prosperity. So, and that's why we're facing in these horrible times, let's say, a sort of a backlash or a sort of an answer. Well, perhaps this is not good. We have to get traditional again, to bring women back into their traditional role, which is of course crazy, but people are people.
So I can understand that desire or that I think it's a very human and understandable desire, which is one we're afraid of change, especially when it seems too rapid, and we want the comfort of what we imagine to be, familiar or traditional, therefore stable. But I think one of the things I've often questioned is, why does that human longing have to be wrapped in the language of such ugliness and hostility? So why, for immigration, for example, it's really ugly. I mean, what does it have to be? I suppose is what I sometimes wonder. I mean, can we have people who kind of long for? Because I do think, for example, that globalization, in certain forms, is frightening. It's frightening to me. And so the idea, for example, that Nigeria imports almost everything. We really do not make things. And I don't like that. Right? And so sometimes, so I'm reading something about, say, Trump, for example. Trump had this America first. We're going to, destroy China and make cars in America. And he had these pipe dreams of things that wouldn't happen. And people responded to that. And I remember once being very critical of Trump, but then suddenly thinking to myself, actually, if I became president of Nigeria, I think I would be very much Nigeria first. It's true, though. I mean, I don't know, obviously, I think maybe we cannot make direct parallels because there are power differences, So Nigeria just doesn't have a lot of economic power in the way that America has.
Although it's the biggest nation in Africa and the biggest economy in Africa.
South Africa South Africa's economy is bigger than ours. We're the most populous. But we do not have, relatively, we can't stand next to the US. It's not the same thing. But I guess my point is that I find there's a level of nuance and complexity in people's desire for what is familiar, what is comfortable. And the part, I could write a character like that, and I think I could make that character sympathetic. But I sometimes wonder why that desire has to come with a kind of inhumane and inhuman ideas and ideologies. So, yeah, I don't know what the answer is. It's just that I find myself thinking about these things a lot. What Americans call the white working class, which I think on the left really just means white people who are racist. America, so the language they use is interesting. Sometimes I read about them and I do feel a kind of sympathy, because I think your towns are deserted, really, and your fathers and mothers worked in plants and mills and things like that, and made a decent living, and now you have nothing but crystal meth, So then you have a leader who tells you the reason everything is bad is black and brown people, and you buy it. What if you had a leader who told you the reason everything is bad is unrestrained capitalism? So I guess I don't know. I think that people have legitimate feelings that maybe leadership corrupts.
For sure.
So if you ran, for example, for Prime Minister of Slovenia,
I'm not that crazy.
You could then get the Slovenian right to understand that it's not immigration that is responsible for their discontent, that it is, by the way, so who immigrates to Slovenia? What? No, what I mean is, no, but you see, so because you're reading about the right and the anti, but are people actually, who's coming?
Well, actually, we have quite a long history of immigration from former other parts of Yugoslavia. Basically, there were quite a lot of people coming from Bosnia, mostly Croatia, partly Serbia to a lesser extent, Kosovo, and Macedonia to work in Slovenia, and a lot of them stayed here. Let's say, international migrants, they pass by.
Yeah.
Of course, they would like to go to Germany and so on,
But so would the right in this country object to Croatians and Bosnians?
Actually not, because they're a quite valuable workforce, a little bit cheaper than Slovenian workforce. So I mean, it's a crazy situation. The problem is actually the color of the skin.
Yeah.
And then we heard that from let's say, still acting Minister of Interior, who of course welcomed Ukrainian refugees, which is perfectly okay. And he said, you know, it's our culture, it's our color of skin, blah blah blah. So it's I think it was a pretty racist statement. Although he says, of course, he didn't mean this. So it's people are passing through Slovenia trying to get to a more Western country, but I mean, but still, it's a European, I wouldn't say problem, a phenomena. So, but yes, I mean, it's something we have to deal with that. By the way, because you mentioned running, are you planning to run for Nigeria's presidency?
Yes, I will. When you run for Prime Minister of Slovenia.
Okay. Deal.
Which means never.
Okay.
I couldn't run for office. No, there are compromises involved that I know I cannot do. But I'm very interested in politics, and I would be happy to, you know, if there was a candidate who I felt, and there is actually someone running for president now who I plan to be involved in his campaign, but I would never run for office. Nigeria is a madhouse.
Yeah, it's a big country, 120 million.
Indeed. So Slovenia is what?
2 million.
2 million. That's kind of like that's like a tiny section of my home state.
That's a big village in Nigeria.
It is,
Yeah.
and it's almost inconceivable. I don't know what it's like to be from a country that just has 2 million people. I can't imagine it.
No, it's actually it's a nice feeling. Sometimes. Feminism. This is something. What people would probably like to see. You are a feminist icon, and we will give the floor for questions.
Yes, I really would love to hear from Slovenian.
So I'll just put feminism, and then you ask questions. I mean, you are an icon of feminism, and then you somehow contributed to Beyoncé. You had a fantastic speech, which is 10 years old exactly.
I don't know why you keep reminding me of how old these things are.
No. I mean, it was a, let's say, YouTube sensation, still is. How did your position on feminism change during this, let's say, 10 years, since this famous "we should all be feminists"
it's actually,
speech?
Yeah. And you know, that speech, I have to say that I'm just still surprised, because I gave that speech in a TED Talk that was this TEDx conference focused on Africa, but it was in London. And I remember thinking, these people will throw stones at me, because feminism is obviously not a subject that is popular on my continent. But I was determined to talk about it because I thought this is something I care about. And so I was very pleasantly surprised, and I continue to be, actually. So it's been 10 years, yes, and I have changed. It's not, I wouldn't take anything back, because I do still very much believe in what I said. But what I would do is I would add layers to it today, if I were asked. And I think the biggest thing has been my own personal experience of pregnancy and becoming a mother. So that really drastically shifted my thinking. And it made me so much more aware of how important it is to talk about how the female body shapes women's lives, women's opportunities, women's options. And I also realized that I hadn't really wanted to talk about it before. And it's not that I didn't know. I mean, obviously I read and I have, aunts and sisters. But personally experiencing it made me realize this is important and it matters. And the reason I didn't want to talk about it much before was that I felt that I would be kind of giving ammunition to the kind of people who say things like, a woman can be president because, she'll get PMS and press the nuclear button, that kind of thing. And so I would often downplay things like that. And I was never really interested in talking about the differences between men and women because I felt that it was too easy to get into that slippery slope of, women have small brains and cannot do math, that kind of thing. But, the brutal physicality of pregnancy and the ways in which your body limits your creativity. So because of pregnancy and having a baby, I really could not write. Mm-hmm. And nobody had told me that your brain stops working. I mean, I don't know if the mother of the 9-month-old is doing okay, but honestly, some women are lucky and they just breeze through pregnancy. My mother had 7 babies in her life. Once she lost a baby, so she had 6 kids. And apparently all her pregnancies were easy. Mm-hmm. So in my pregnancy, my mother was looking at me like, I don't understand why you're having such a difficult time, right? I just breeze through mine. But some people do, and I think it's important to talk about. So that's kind of really, I've become very interested in, so for example, I've been reading about health funding for people who want to research women's health issues and how there's a huge disparity. So, and it makes me so angry that we live in a world where we can do the most intricate brain surgery and we can transplant hearts and we can cut off bits of lungs and people still live, but we cannot sort out women's hormonal problems, right? So I go to my gynecologist and she's like, just get on the pill. And I tell her, no, it makes me angry and fat. And she says, well, deal with it because there's nothing else. And I think for me as a creative person, it's a particular thing that happens to you because you're a woman. Men do not have to deal with pregnancy brain. And it's a very frustrating thing because I'm a person for whom my creativity is really central to my joy. And having a child was the highlight of my life. It still is. My daughter is 6 and she's perfect. But that's actually why it's been 10 years since Americana. It's because of my female body. So that would be the thing that I would. So if I did the speech again, I would start with a long, angry rant about nature being misogynistic, about the world's health, global health enterprise not valuing women, and then I probably would end with telling women beware. No, I'm kidding. But no, I think my larger point is that we live in a world so women's bodies do the work of ensuring that our species continues, right? That we don't go extinct. And I understand that there are people who might not want us to go extinct because of how we're destroying the planet, but that's a different thing. And so women's bodies do that, but I think that the policies that we have across the world do not make room for that. So women get pregnant, leave work, they come back, they don't get promoted. And so that's actually really what this gender pay gap is about, more than about evil employers who pay men more. So it's women who take time off to have babies, and it's women who then kind of lose out on the rewards. And then you wonder, if we want the human race to continue, then we have to create policy and room to acknowledge the fact that women's bodies do the work, and we don't. And it makes me angry.
It was really fascinating to imagine your talk 10 years after. So it was really a fantastic speech in my head already.
Well, write it for me and send it to me, and then
okay. So
make sure it's full of details.
Slovenians have a lot of quite interesting national sports, like ski jumping. You know that?
No.
Flying more than 100 meters on skis, more than 2 meters and a half, from a big jumping
I have
hill to
seen
the
that.
bottom. And the ladies are the best in the world
Yeah, it doesn't
in
surprise
that,
me.
yeah. Asking questions to famous panelists, it's not a national sport, but it may be different tonight. So, people, ask questions.
Prove him wrong. My sisters, do it.
Yeah, okay. You're supposed to read something.
Oh.
Yes, yeah, but let us hear questions. Yes, I see a raising hand. A gentleman.
It's not a sister, but I have a question about the reception of your work in Nigeria, in particular your second novel, Fabula. So do you get much response from Nigeria?
So when it was published, I mean, so the war is still very contested, you know. Ended in 1970, but still, and actually right now there's a new Biafran movement, and it's very complicated and it's complex, but it's, so, which is to say
It's
that...
not as complicated as Slovenian politics, for sure.
Trust me, it is.
No, it's not.
It is. So it is more complicated than Slovenian politics. We don't have enough time. I would school you properly on it, but... The women are clapping, the men are not.
Women are right.
No, but because it's so contested still, when I was writing the book, I remember just constantly being told to leave it alone. You know, why are you writing about Biafra? Leave that subject alone. You're just looking for trouble. And when it came back, the first event that I did in Lagos, my Nigerian publisher said to me, you have to be prepared for anything. And so I wasn't sure, you know, should I wear a helmet? Are they going to stone me? You know, that sort of thing. But it just ended up with half the hall screaming at the other half. So that was fun. And since then, it's in school syllabi, and it's very widely read in Nigeria. It's a novel that's, you know, it's really well known, and it's become, for my generation of Nigerians, history, right? So many young people, youngish and young, talk about how they really did not know what had happened until they read Half of a Yellow Sun. And so I would have these events that would become so emotional because people would say, I read your book, and then I went home and I said to my father and my mother, you know, what's your story? What happened to you? And also people who would say to me, after I read it, I understood my father. Because so many men in particular, of that generation, did not talk about their experiences, but they were wounded. Right? So they were wounded men, spiritual and emotionally wounded men. And I think they carried it into their lives and to their families, and their children did not understand. And so many stories came out of I mean, one of the things that's so meaningful to me about Half of a Yellow Sun is how it allowed people to talk about their experiences. And yeah. So it's but of course, there are also people who say, well, you know, she wants to destroy Nigeria, that sort of thing. And when a film was made of it, it was banned for a while in Nigeria because the censors board said that it would incite political violence or something like that. I hadn't realized I was that powerful, but that's...
Great. Next question. Yes.
Intellectual, so like a dream. It carved like the mango tree and everything. I was wondering, does that feeling, that family, friendly life still exists?
Yeah. So that, I based a lot of Half of a Yellow Sun on my father's stories, obviously. And so my father was not at all like the main character, Udenibo. My father was a very quiet man, But he had friends who would, and he told me about these parties they would have, these gatherings where they would, fiercely debate ideas. And, this is the 60s where, post-independence Africa is full of hope, and then they would dance and they would drink. And so I based that on my father's stories. And when the war ended, life kind of went back to normal. People, I remember my father telling me that one of the things that the university was very quick to reconstruct was the tennis court, so that people could go back to play tennis. And so yes, and today, the universities in Nigeria, sadly, many of them are in terrible decline, not at all like they were in the 70s, and to an extent the early 80s when I was growing up. And that started happening because we had military governments that stopped funding education, and so everything went down. But is family life still joyful? Yes. And it cuts across class. Actually, apparently at some point we were said to be the happiest people on earth. I don't quite know how the data was collected, but but I do have to say that Nigeria, if you visited, I think one of the things that you would be struck by is how people are just so effortlessly warm. We're very welcoming, and yeah.
Good question. Lady in first row.
Hello.
I have to say I'm so excited to see you in person. And actually, I'm from Serbia, and my husband is from the Netherlands. So by accident, we are coming here, and we are actually immigrants here in Slovenia. I don't have so much a question, but just to say I read all your books, and I found out about you by watching the TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, which I loved. Maybe my question would be, how much are the characters in Americana based on you and your private life? And how were maybe your first years when you moved in America?
Well, first, what is it like being an immigrant in Slovenia? Are they okay?
They're very nice. Yeah, they're very nice to us. Yes. But also because I have a Dutch husband.
I think the Dutch are suffering because we have such high mountains and they have nothing.
Hold on. So being Dutch, there's a hierarchy of... So Dutch is higher than... Oh, I see.
So I have a better visa than other Serbians because I'm married to him.
The world is so fucked up. Yeah, it's incredible, right? You would think Serbia being your former siblings, sort of, that you would be nicer to them, but no. Yeah. The world is messed up like that, I know, yeah.
Yeah, when we went to the office, first they told me I need to collect tons of papers, I need to have a lot of money on my bank account. And then I said, well, I have a Dutch husband. Oh, then it's not a problem. We can fix it today. We can fix it today.
That actually, it's interesting. I remember, yeah. I was going to tell a personal story, but I won't. About a Dutchman, but I won't. About a Dutchman and stroopwafel, but I won't. Anyway, Americana is not really, so I like to say that Ifemele is more interesting than I am. My life is not quite as incident-filled as hers, but I've used things it's not journalistic, really, but I like fact, if that makes sense. So if I'm writing a story setting a town, I really do the homework. I want to know the town. And so in writing Americana, it was much easier for me to write about the cities in the US where I had lived, so that I knew them. So really, so I lived in Brooklyn, I lived in Philadelphia, small town Connecticut features because I know it. So I wrote about where I had lived. And I used some of my experiences, but because my life is not so interesting, I like to steal from people. But then
Ideas, you mean?
Everything.
Oh.
I steal pens. I would be a bit more subtle. I wouldn't do it on stage if I wanted to steal your phone, but...
You never know with Nigerians,
It's true, right? We do have a reputation, but you have to...
Especially in South Africa, I'm quite familiar with South Africa. So I'll have it in my pocket.
But you know, I'm going to do a very brief defense of my nation. So South Africans say we come and we take things from them and we do drugs and blah, blah, blah. Well, why do they let us? Because we're smarter. So, yeah.
You're right, probably.
You need to come to Nigeria.
Again.
No, but yeah, your question was how...
yeah, the characters in Americana.
Yeah. So
Stealing and stealing.
Yeah, so I like to steal from people, mostly ideas and experiences, and then I do things with them. And I did that a lot in Americana. So my friends, for example, would read something and be like, I told you that story, but that's not quite how it happened. And I would say to them, yes, that I had, that's why I'm a fiction writer. I don't just put it in. But really, I think the bits that are most autobiographical, you know what it is? I think I had Ifemelu say the things that I thought but didn't say. So I think the bits that are most autobiographical in that sense are where she experiences blackness and all of its, the ways in which race is, racism in America is both awful and also sometimes just absurd and funny. Right? And I experienced those things, but I didn't, unlike Ifemelo, I didn't sort of at dinner tell people off about race. I think I wished I did, but I didn't. So I had her do it. Yeah.
Yes? What does it mean to be a pure Slovenian? But are also your parents Slovenians with Slovenian parents? I mean, are you sure that you're pure enough?
Going all the way back to Kenya.
Well, actually, my daughter's hairdresser is Kenyan. So we have a kind of interesting or different life in a way, because I'm going to be quite personal, if you don't mind. Our daughter is adopted from Ghana. And you were talking about racism, and I read a lot about racism in America of adult adoptees, and it's really much bigger than here. But here is also not so open racism as hidden, or how I don't know if I used the right word. And also our daughter is experiencing that, and of course sometimes it hurts her. And I wonder, how do you cope with that, and how do you survive? Maybe I'll get some of your experiences to help our daughter.
How old is she?
She's 8.5.
Does she, do you have any black people that she, yeah? Okay, I think that's really important. She needs to see black people.
That's why we are here too.
Ooh, well, I'm happy to be one black person. But, yeah. I think also books in which black people do things that are ordinary is really important. I think it's important, it's important for my daughter, and my daughter spends her life in Nigeria and the US, but so I think it's even more important for your daughter who's going to grow up. She's going to have a hard time. So you really have to be there and give her all the support. And I think the one thing I would say is it's really important to hear her and not to be dismissive and not to say, oh, it's nothing. Yeah.
We're trying to encourage her to stand for herself and to give her as much as possible the feeling that she's okay, no matter the color of the skin.
Yeah. But not by telling her that you're colorblind, or okay.
See all the colors.
Yeah.
We have friends from Africa, from Iran, from we're trying to be open. We also contribute to African festival here, and because it's part of us.
May I have a suggestion? You just tell her that she's as pure Slovenian as you are. Which is true.
Yeah, No, I think the kids in school will tell her she's not.
but they're wrong.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Her schoolmate, a few days ago, last week, her schoolmate is I don't want to say white, light-skinned. What's the proper word? And he said, "We want to play with this black thing here." And she was like, she came home and she said, "Oh, they told me that." But I said, "Okay." And I said, "Sometimes you have to ignore this. Sometimes you have to not to swallow it."
What's the child who said that? It's interesting to think about what that child is learning in that child's home. Yeah. Children learn racism.
But it's not the first thing she has experienced. With this thing, we had for about 1 hour at home of tantrum and balancing her. I'm sorry if I'm too personal, but
No. I'm actually just thinking about eight-year-old people saying that we won't play with that black thing.
But you may borrow her story.
Yeah. I'm also just wondering how you came to adopt in Ghana.
It's not uncommon here. I mean, in Europe,
Because
yeah.
Ethiopia you hear about, but Ghana,
you know what was our first thought? I don't know, or I'm not sure if the dark-skinned child would be okay here in our society. And then we said, no, we want to adopt in Russia, you know. And then we were in a group of future adoptive parents, and they said, no, in Russia it's closing, you can't do it, and it's really much harder. And then some future adoptive parents showed us the pictures. We don't adopt each child from Ghana, blah, blah, blah. And then we were thinking about, okay, let's do it. Because in the past, I already had a ticket to Ghana, and I went to Thailand. And I feel something, when I hear African drums, something is, I don't know, I have roots there, I don't know. And I said, no, something we have to do.
Perhaps she has better chances to be the next mayor of Ljubljana because of Mr. Bosman. Okay, if there are not any more questions, then I would, one question, and then we have to hear Ms. Adichie that she would read something to us, and she would then sign the books.
yes. I'd also just like, do we have a bit of time? I'd just like to hear what it's like to be a young or youngish woman in Slovenia today. What are the concerns that women have? What makes them angry? What do they think needs to change?
Okay. So it's your question to the audience.
Yes.
So let us hear the answers.
Or you can ask your question first if you,
I wanted to ask someone who's loves writing and you, what did you write when you were my age? I'm 12 years old.
oh. When I was 12, so when I was 12, I was in grade 5. No, I was in class 2. So I was in secondary school. I was reading, because I was an early reader, I read sort of grown-up books quite early. So at 12, I was reading a history of the Catholic Church, pre-colonial West Africa, but also novels. I read everything. I really liked this crime series by a writer called James Hadley Chase, which nobody knows. Nobody outside of Africa knows him. And apparently he was this Englishman who made up. They're so popular, and I read all of them. I read a lot of romance. I read a lot of Mills and Boon romances, which is this British romance series. I read just a lot of pulp fiction. I started reading the African Writers series about that time as well. I just read everything I could find. So my best friend's father, had a huge library of novels. My father had a library of just mathematical books and things. And sometimes in desperation, if there's nothing else to read, I actually would read the Annals of Non-Parametric Statistics. I'm serious.
Great choice.
So I read everything, and I was writing at 12 in class 2. What did I write? I I think I was right. Yeah, I started writing about Nigerians because when I was younger, I was writing about white people. But I was writing, so I was writing longhand. I had these exercise books, and I would write novels, in longhand in these books when I was 12. So what I would say to you is just read everything. Read everything, and it's so important to know what you like and what you don't like, and you won't know it until you read them. And also, I think we teach ourselves when we read. So I can tell you now, for example, that I cannot take crime novels anymore. I find them, they just do not interest me. Science fiction does not interest me. I find it to be, just a waste of my reading time. And I'm always thinking about all the novels I haven't read. So I know what I love now. I know that I love realistic fiction. I know that I love fiction that does psychology well. And I know that because I read so widely. So I think that whatever your mother has, take it and read it. If she thinks you shouldn't, just hide it in your room and read it anyway. Do you like to write? Yes, that's lovely.
In Slovenian or English?
So what do you write in Italian? Nice.
Which
Keep
is
writing.
a very romantic language.
Keep writing.
Yeah. Okay, great answers.
Yes, please. I wish I could see the audience.
And I'm trying to do that through a feminist lens, trying to find some sort of strength in my femininity and not.
Can you give me an example when you say that choices that reject the patriarchal system?
It can be as simple as, I don't know, putting on makeup, or shaving your legs, or appearing in a way that that society wants to see femininity. Protecting femininity.
But do you think that feminism somehow is imposing that on you? I mean, you don't have to wear makeup.
Not feminism, but patriarchy.
Oh, I see. But I would actually argue that that's. I wear makeup for myself. It has absolutely nothing to do with men. Actually, men don't even get makeup. And it's true, though. I mean, I know how amused my husband is when I do something that I call a blue smoky eye. And he's like, "Are you okay? What happened to your eye?" And I'm thinking, I've done a cool eye. It's edgy. And he's just like, "What's happening?" Or I remember once going to try out these sort of new highlighters. And my brother sees me and he's like, "Did somebody slap your face?" Because he said it looked a bit too rosy. But anyway, but really, I think, and this idea of choice feminism, which I guess what you're saying is that, and maybe I might be wrong, but are you saying that the idea that women now have limitless choices and that whatever you do, as long as it's your choice, somehow it's feminist and empowering? Yeah.
And I feel like a bad feminist for not making certain choices and making choices that make my life under patriarchy easier.
So you're actually just beating yourself up for no reason at all. So now I see what you're saying. You're saying, I really wish, can I see the audience? Is there a way the light could change? Because I'm just staring into darkness. So you're saying that, for example, wearing makeup makes you feel as though you're taking the easy way out, and you're kind of doing what makes it easy for you to exist in a society that still is very much patriarchal? Yes. You know what's interesting to me is how much women, if men were the ones who were feminists, they would not spend so much time beating themselves up about how they had failed at feminism. This is another consequence of female socialization. And this is the kind of thing I really think that we need to just shrug off. Right, so for me, I think that, and again, one of the reasons I'm not very interested in the buzzwords of Western feminism, because I think many of them have become almost meaningless. So, and the reason that I said empowering in quotes and with a bit of a sneer is because it's not even, I don't like that word empowering, and it's often used. So, you'll see women's magazines saying things like, buy the latest bikini, it's empowering. And I'm thinking it's not, it's just a bikini. But on the other hand, I think thinking that somehow, that to be feminist is somehow to perfectly tick all the boxes is also just really self-defeating. Feminism for me is a way of it's also a deeply personal thing. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of living my own life. But I'm not judging myself against some kind of perfect, secret society of feminists handbook. For me, what's important is I don't want to make choices in my life that somehow contributes to limiting women. I don't want to, so for example, in the US, abortion rights, for example. So if a woman says to me, I'm pro-life, which is an expression I don't even like, I think all of us, I think every human being, decent human being is pro-life, right? So if someone says to me, I'm pro-forced birth, right? I will say to them, I respect that, as long as it's a choice you make for yourself. But making it for other women is a problem, because you do not get to decide what another woman does with her body. So I would never, for example, willingly vote for somebody who was anti-reproductive rights for women. I would not, and I question myself a lot. For me, my feminism is also about constantly looking inward and examining myself. So I think, for example, that because the world is so misogynistic, and we grew up in misogyny, both men and women, so women participate in misogyny. And so there are times when I'm asking myself, am I judging this woman more harshly than I would judge a man who did exactly the same thing? Because the world does that. And I think sometimes we do things without actually realizing that we're doing them. So I'm spending a lot more time. There's a woman I really do not like. And she does things and I'm just so critical. And at some point I thought, hold on, would I be as critical if she wasn't a woman? In other words, am I holding this woman to unnecessarily higher standards? The same things that I accuse the world of doing to women. So it's something for me that I'm trying very hard to be conscious of and not do. That for me would be how I kind of, it would be my public participation of feminism. And speaking of participation, I also now choose not to participate in discourses that I think diminish women. So if someone is talking about a woman who's a politician and they're talking about how she's angry, I will not participate in that conversation because I think it's stupid. When a woman has passion, she's angry. When a man has passion, he's strong and he's a leader. And I just will not participate. So those are the ways for me. So I'm not thinking, I'm wearing makeup, therefore, I don't know, men, yeah. And I really think that it's important for women to be kinder and gentler to themselves. Female socialization is such a bitch. And we spend so much time, women look at pictures of themselves and they're looking for things to hate. Men look at pictures of themselves, they're like, not too bad. My big belly isn't too bad. Women are like, look, I look terrible, my bed. Yeah, just stop.
Okay, and the last question
goes
to the Dutchman.
I'm curious, where can men help feminism? And also, where will it meet together? Because if feminism goes through the roof, then where are we?
So you'll be trampled, buried alive. We'll just take over the world. No, we don't know. So I think that the goal of feminism is to make itself extinct, really. So my vision of the world, my utopia is a world where everyone has equal value, everyone has equal opportunity, people are not judged for, you know, being women or being black or being poor or being gay, that sort of thing. That's my utopia. So the goal of feminism is to get to a point where we don't need feminism. But that's kind of, you know, that might happen in 1,000 years. I mean, we've had all of these years of human civilization that have been so drenched in misogyny. It's going to take a long time. There is no place in the world where men and women are equal. There just isn't. And so I think it's a slow walk. And I also think that men have to be part of it.
More becomes the feminine inside of man.
No, it's not even so much that I don't think masculinity, and again, one of those buzzwords, toxic masculinity, I don't even know what it means, but I think maybe it means that there's just a lot of crap men do in, you know, sort of dick measuring. I think what Putin is doing in Ukraine is an example of dick measuring. It's such a male sort of, you know, thing. I think if a woman had been leader of Russia, it wouldn't be happening, because it's quite male. So I think that might be an example of toxic masculinity, this kind of fragile ego that is so fragile that it needs to wrap itself up in a hollow macho-ness. Right? But I think masculinity can be a beautiful thing. You know, I think someone sent me a video of this young boy, two boys who are playing rugby, and maybe one fell, and the other goes to him and says, you're great at rugby, do you hear me? Don't cry, and he hugs him. I thought, that's it's so beautiful. I mean, so it's two boys supporting each other. That's the kind of thing I think, you know, we should teach boys to do more, because I don't think that men have the ability to form deep, lasting friendships, because nobody taught them how. No, he's going to tell me you're wrong, and then he's going to tell me he has 5
Actually, you're not.
friends.
But, okay.
No, I think men and men. I mean, men friendships, you know. And I sometimes feel that if that were the case, then, you know, I sometimes wonder if Putin had a
boyfriend.
Yes. And not necessarily in a romantic way, but if he had good, solid men friends who could say to him, hey, guy, that's messed up. You know, that actually makes you an uncool guy. He probably wouldn't do the shit that he's doing, you know? But when I think men, because power is still very much in male hands, it's not just about men making the conscious decision to hire women, and I think that's important. But it's also little things. A friend of mine in London was talking about this man who, after the Me Too movement and the stories that women told, this man said he hadn't realized how afraid women were, like walking in the dark, for example. So the stories of women holding their khakis in a particular way just in case, you would need to use it as a weapon. And so he said that he had decided that if he were walking outside at night and there was a woman alone walking, he would cross the road and not walk behind her, because he realized that she probably would be terrified if a man was walking behind her. And I found that very moving, because it showed that men sometimes do things not because they're evil or wicked, but because they don't know, right? Men don't really know women's stories. And I think also in the more intimate spaces, I think husbands and boyfriends could do a bit more. Not just housework, so who does, I mean, so you know, Slovenian women are out working, and that's fantastic, and Slovenia is prosperous, but who does the bulk of domestic work in Slovenia?
It depends.
You know, I think all over the world, it's women. And it's work that is often not valued. It's work that is easy to dismiss, but it's work that it's essential for a family to thrive. So I think that's how men can contribute to feminism as well, not thinking that domestic work is automatically women's work. And also, you know, I think women in general, and you know, I've talked to women there are differences, of course. I think race is a difference, class is a difference, but there is, I think, certain things that are universal female experiences because of female socialization. So when I've talked to women in Mexico, in Colombia, in South Korea, in Japan, in Ghana, in Kenya, the stories are often similar. It's women who often give up their dreams because they've been socialized to put other people first. So they're women who have had things that they have longed for, but they put them aside. It's women who feel guilty for wanting things for themselves. It's women who beat themselves up a lot, like someone here did. And I think maybe if men were a bit more sensitive to that, that would also be a way of contributing to feminism, right? Because, that automatic assumption that if both people in a relationship are ambitious, that somehow the man's ambition automatically matters more. I think sometimes men participate in that without even knowing that they are, because it's the norm. And I think men, by being a bit more aware, contribute to feminism. We cannot have equality in the boardroom if the bedroom isn't fixed. Right? We need both. We do. I mean, our personal lives are very much shaped, very much shape our public lives, which is why, for example, I said I have not written a damn novel because I had a baby. And I'm actually lucky to be married to a man who's fantastically feminist, but still, I couldn't write a novel.
Still can improve.
No, not that he still can improve. It's still that, he does everything, he did everything apart from breastfeeding, because he couldn't. And then breastfeeding had consequences for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'm truly honored being in your presence. I feel like I'm in the presence of a rock star. So I've read your books and just I think you're one of the best contemporary authors in the world.
Thank you.
One maybe personal question: being a feminist, being a person who knows the limitations of our own gender, did a decision of a motherhood came likely to you as being as a creative person, being a female in general?
Yeah. I really appreciate that question. For a long time, I didn't want to have children because I was too in love with my work. And because I have a bit of an obsessive personality, I felt that I couldn't possibly be the kind of perfect mother that I wanted to be because I was so obsessed with my writing. And then I suddenly started wanting a baby. No, actually, you know what happened? What happened, again, the female body, what happened is that I go to see the doctor and I'm told I have a huge fibroid. And I had to have surgery, which I did. And after surgery, the doctor said to me, if you want to have babies, you need to do it now because you have a 30% chance of ever getting pregnant. And I thought, what? So it's that thing where you want to know that you have the option, even if you're not taking it. And when suddenly I was told the options were decreasing, I thought, that's it, I'm having a baby. And in some ways, I'm so grateful to that fibroid because but it did not. It's not a decision that came easily. And I think for a lot of women, it's that trying to balance. You have your dreams and you have the things that you long for, and you desperately also want to have children, and you realize that a lot of the work will be yours. And so I have artist friends who love children but choose not to have children because they know that they can't do both. And it's something I really respect when women make that decision. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we get a short read from you?
Right, okay.
And
So,
then we get signatures from you.
Yes, I'll be happy to. Thank you, by the way, to everyone, and thank you. Can I actually see... Thank you. I wanted to see now that the lighting is better, I wanted to see the woman who asked the question about choice feminism. Oh, so I can't even see up there. Oh, so you were up there. Hi. Thank you for your question. So this is from Notes on Grief. From England, my brother set up the Zoom calls every Sunday. Our boisterous lockdown ritual. 2 siblings joining from Lagos, 3 of us from the United States, and my parents, sometimes echoing and crackly, from Aba, our ancestral hometown in southeastern Nigeria. On 7 June, there was my father, only his forehead on the screen, as usual, because he never quite knew how to hold his phone during video calls. "Move your phone a bit, Daddy," one of us would say. My father was teasing my brother, okay, about a new nickname. Then he was saying he hadn't had dinner because they had had a late lunch. Then he was talking about the billionaire from the next town who wanted to claim our village's ancestral land. He felt a bit unwell, had been sleeping poorly, but we were not to worry. On 8 June, Oke went to Aba to see him and said he looked tired. On 9 June, I kept our chat brief so that he could rest. He laughed quietly when I did my playful imitation of a relative. "Kachifo," he said. "Good night." His last words to me. On 10 June, he was gone. My brother Chuks called to tell me, and I came undone. My 4-year-old daughter says I scared her. She gets down on her knees to demonstrate, her small clenched fist rising and falling, and her mimicry makes me see myself as I was, utterly unraveling, screaming and pounding the floor. The news is like a vicious uprooting. I am yanked away from the world I have known since childhood, and I am resistant. My father read the newspaper that afternoon. He joked with Oke about shaving before his appointment with the kidney specialist in Onitsha the next day. He discussed his hospital test results on the phone with my sister, Ijeawele, who is a doctor. And so, how can this be? But there he is. Oke is holding a phone over my father's face, and my father looks asleep, his face relaxed, beautiful in repose. Our Zoom call is beyond surreal. All of us weeping and weeping in different parts of the world, looking in disbelief at the father we adore, now lying still in a hospital bed. It happened a few minutes before midnight, Nigerian time, with Oke by his side and Chuks on speakerphone. I stare and stare at my father. My breathing is difficult. Is this what shock means? That the air turns to glue? My sister Uche says she has just told a family friend by text, and I almost scream, "No, don't tell anyone because if we tell people, then it becomes true." My husband is saying, "Breathe slowly, drink some of this water." My house coat, my lockdown staple, is lying crumpled on the floor. Later, my brother Kene will jokingly say, "You better not get any shocking news in public, since you react to shock by tearing off your clothes." Grief is a cruel kind of education. You learn how ungentle mourning can be, how full of anger. You learn how glib condolences can feel. You learn how much grief is about language, the failure of language, and the grasping for language. Why are my sides so sore and achy? It's from crying, I'm told. I did not know that we cry with our muscles. The pain is not surprising, but its physicality is, my tongue unbearably bitter, as though I ate a loath meal and forgot to clean my teeth. On my chest, a heavy, awful weight, and inside my body, a sensation of eternal dissolving. My heart, my actual physical heart, nothing figurative here, is running away from me, has become its own separate thing, beating too fast, its rhythms at odds with mine. This is an affliction not merely of the spirit, but of the body, of aches and lagging strength. Flesh, muscles, organs are all compromised. No physical position is comfortable. For weeks, my stomach is in turmoil, tense and tight with foreboding, the ever-present certainty that somebody else will die, that more will be lost. One morning, Oke calls me a little earlier than usual, and I think, just tell me, tell me immediately who has died now. Is it Mommy? In my American home, I like to have National Public Radio on as background noise. And whenever my father was staying, he would turn it off if nobody was there listening to it. I just thought about how Daddy was always turning off the radio and I was always turning it back on. He probably thought it was wasteful in some way. I tell okay. I retell the story of my parents visiting me in my graduate student apartment at Yale when I say, "Daddy, will you have some pomegranate juice?" And he says, "No, thank you, whatever that is." Pomegranate juice became a standing joke. All those standing jokes we had, frequently told and retold. My father's expression, 1 minute utterly deadpan, and then the next wide open with delighted laughter. Another revelation, how much laughter is a part of grief. Laughter is tightly braided into our family argot, and now we laugh, remembering my father. But somewhere in the background, there is a haze of disbelief. The laughter trails off. The laughter becomes tears and becomes sadness and becomes rage. I am unprepared for my wretched, roaring rage. In the face of this inferno that is sorrow, I am callow and unformed. But how can it be that in the morning he's joking and talking, and at night he's gone forever? It was so fast, too fast. It was not supposed to happen like this, not like a malicious surprise, not during a pandemic that has shut down the world. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
So, Mr. Adichie, that was really great. Do you have 1 more hour?
2 more. I wanted to say I really love the cover of the Slovenian edition.
Yes.
I think it's very beautiful.
And it's also a beautiful translation by Špela Budopivec. I followed the Slovenian translation. It's really nice. You should hear it. Okay, but later on, perhaps one of the members of the audience could read you something before you sign for him.
Okay, I think that sounds like a plan.
That would be nice. So thank you very much for talking to you. Again, welcome to Slovenia. It's a really nice country with higher mountains than in the Netherlands, of course.
You know, I find it really curious how Europeans are very quick to praise their own countries.
That's very Slovenian.
No, actually, it happened, no, not just, it's European. It happened in Amsterdam. So a man says to me, have you had a chance to see our wonderful city? And I thought, why don't you let me decide whether it's wonderful, right? And I said to him, the canals seem a bit moldy, like they could do with a good scrub. And he wasn't happy to hear that. But I think when you're from Africa, you just do not assume that people love your country. You just don't. You do not go through the world with that assumption. You expect people to be either indifferent or dislike your country. And so, for me, it's just a shocking thing that Europeans will tell me, "Oh, my country is beautiful," and I don't always agree with them. But Amsterdam was fine.
Okay, thank you, and I'm informed that you would be ready now to sign the books, which will be, of course, a great occasion also for the audience. Thank you from my side,
Thank you.
and take care.
Thank you.